right, good morning everybody. My name is Brian Sloman. I am the software development manager at MicroSurvey Software. Today I'm going to talk to you about our company, MicroSurvey. I'm going to give you a bit of a demonstration of a couple of things that we've built in one of our products called Map 360. And it's a little bit about MicroSurvey. We were founded in 1985, so we've been around for about 35 years. We serve three primary market segments. We create surveying software for land surveying and forensic investigation. We also repackage our software to OEM, other hardware manufacturers who sell it under their brand names. We're based in Kelowna, BC, Canada, which I'll show you a map in a second. We have about 40 employees and contractors all over the world. Most of us are in Kelowna, but we have people in Mexico, in Europe, Russia, of course, and elsewhere. Our products are used all over the world. They've been translated into several different languages. And back in 2012, we were acquired by a company called Hexagon. So Kelowna, we're on the westernmost province in Canada called British Columbia. That said, we're about 400 kilometers inland from the Pacific coast, so we're definitely not on the coast itself. This is a picture of Kelowna, and yeah, the topography is very similar to Italy here, I think. We have the mountains and a beautiful lake. We're on a lake that runs about 110 kilometers north to south. Anyways, a bit about MicroSurvey. As I mentioned, we were started in 1985. Our founder, Darcy Detler, who I know some of you here know well, he was building systems, and by systems I mean it was a complete system containing a physical computer, a printer, and the software that he had wrote for doing survey calculations. Back in the early 90s, we started creating plugins for AutoCAD to create more of a drafting type software, of course. And then a few years later, he switched from being a plugin to AutoCAD to having a very standalone product which used a CAD engine called FelixCAD. I'm sure some of you are familiar with that. It's from a company called Grabert in Germany. In 1998, we entered the forensic market. He recognized a lot of very close similarities between the work that land surveyors do and the work that forensic investigators do. And so we started a new line of products called MapScene Systems. And that's the birth of what I'll show you today. We also make data collection software that runs on handheld devices. We have two products called Field Genius for the survey market, Evidence Recorder for the forensic market. In 2005, this was an interesting year. But for one thing, this is when I joined MicroSurvey. And I came on board right at the time where we were having a lot of problems with the FelixCAD engine. Over the previous year, we had gone through a difficult period of stability problems and major bugs and things like that, and our customers were becoming a little bit frustrated with the experience that they were having. So when I joined, we were working on the 11th service pack of that year for the FelixCAD product, and while working on that, we were also working on this brand new product, which of course was based on IntelliCAD. At the time it was IntelliCAD version 5. Anyways, shortly after we released that, Autodesk terminated our ADN agreement, and I know that's a story that's been a bit of a theme, is familiar to many other members. 2008 and 2009, we got into some new software markets, and in 2011, TechSoft, who we had a relationship with for one of our other products, when they started taking over Autodesk's OEM business, they approached us and we regained our ADN membership and began selling the OEM, AutoCAD OEM engine again. So we have a product that's powered by AutoCAD now. In 2012, as I mentioned, we were acquired by Hexagon. And a big part of that acquisition was their interest in our forensic software. So our product, IMS Map 360, this was a rebranding of our MapScenes software that we had. That was a big reason for why they were interested in us. 2016, a few years ago, we started a proprietary development team in Russia with the IntelliCAD programmers, and that has been very successful. We needed to accelerate some of our development efforts, and this was a really good way to do that. Our focus today is on the survey and forensic products. And yeah, that's where we are. This is a grid of our different products that we have. Red ones here represent the IntelliCAD based software. MicroSurvey CAD is for our survey market, IMS Map 360 for the forensic market, and today I'll be focusing on this one. Map 360 is an important software for our clients. It, even though it's branded as a Leica product, our history of being vendor neutral and being able to support different manufacturers and different methods of measuring data, whether it's manual or using electronic measurements, is very important. The police officers across the world, they vary in the different technologies that you use. A lot of them still use hand tape measures, whereas more sophisticated agencies will use very cutting-edge equipment, including laser scanners. It's very specifically focused on crime scene and crash scene reconstruction, so they're not using a tool that was built for surveying. They have a lot of power, of course, from IntelliCAD and from that platform that we use. As I mentioned, we import, or we can work with all sorts of different types of data. So manual measurement data, all sorts of different electronic sensors, whether they're manufactured by Leica or other hardware equipment, hardware manufacturers, or even data from other software companies, including some that we compete against or partner with. Anyways, they import their data from whatever source. They do all sorts of different tasks within Map 360, and they're doing that work in order to create different types of deliverables that ultimately are intended for taking into court to basically prove what happened at a particular scene. I'm going to fire through these fairly quickly, but some of the different workflows that we support, including crime scenes. So you can see we've got a crime scene. There's quite a bit of evidence on the ground here and a body traced. Essentially what they're doing, they're trying to take that live scene and turn it into a CAD drawing, basically not even specifically CAD, but something that they can print out and present in court. And that's what we see here on the right. We have some sophisticated trajectory analysis tools. This is what Jason had presented last year, for those of you who were at IntelliCAD World last year. Bloodstain pattern analysis. This is something I will be demonstrating shortly. It's a little bit hard to see this image, so I'll just zoom in a little bit on it. You can see on this wall, it looks like it's dirty. It's actually covered in blood stains or blood spatter. So what we're able to do is measure those blood stains on the wall and be able to reconstruct the point of impact, determine exactly where in a 3D space the blood originated from. Different reporting tools, witness views to corroborate what a witness said may or may not have happened. Big focus on crash scenes, so traffic collisions, reconstructing what happened. We've a crush analysis tool where we're measuring the deformation of a vehicle when the two vehicles collide. The deformation pattern along a vehicle can tell us the impact energy and the angle of impact, and the police can use that to reconstruct what happened. Again, more reporting tools and animations, which I'll also show. Okay, so I'm going to get into a live demo here. So I'm going to start out with just creating a new empty drawing. I'm going to import in a point cloud. So what we have here, it looks like it's just a square. It's actually a scan from a 3D point scanner inside a room. So what we need to be able to do is get inside this room that was scanned. I'm just going to flip it kind of edge on here. And I'm going to use one of our tools to cut the top off of this room. I'm just going to snap onto the cloud and slice off a chunk. If I look down at it from above now, you can see into the room, and I'm able to determine this is the wall I'm interested over on the right-hand side. where you might recognize from the photo before, this is where we have the blood stains on the wall that I'm going to be working with. I'm just going to look at it from the top view again, and I'm going to use one of my clipping tools to remove the points that are outside of this area so that we can focus just on the wall. So the point cloud technology that we have here, the scanners are getting better and better every year. You can see the detail in the scan here. You can make out some of these spots on the wall, and these are the blood stains. In the scan, we have a point about every millimeter or so on the wall, which is pretty good. We can see a very good scene, but it's not quite accurate enough for this particular application for measuring the size, the dimensions of those blood stains. So what I'm going to do, we've built some tools to improve or augment the quality of that scan. I'm going to start my blood pattern analysis tool. And what I'm going to do is define the working surface. I'm just going to start with one of the walls. We have different ways of measuring the wall or determining it. I'm just going to snap to a point right on the cloud. So I'm just going to pick a point anywhere in this wall here, and what it's going to do is it's analyzing the point cloud and it's creating a best fit plane that represents that wall. So it's figuring out which points are representative of the wall, which points are not, and determining a nice flat plane. I'm going to select an origin point for this wall. Now I'm just going to pick down at the bottom left corner. That's going to be used really for referencing measurements. So when we get to the report, you'll see later, all of the blood stains will be measured from a corner, often a corner along the floor, sometimes a corner along the roof, but it would be where an officer would be able to actually physically measure to that blood stain if they needed to. So what we do is our users, the police officers, they will take photos at the scene. So along with the scan itself, they also have photographs that are close-up of the blood stain patterns. And I'm just going to find one here. I'm going to overlay this into point cloud itself. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to place it nearby where it's going to go. And now I'm going to do an alignment. So it's prompting down at our reduce command line here to select points. So I'm just going to click on a point that's in the image, and I'm at just a very recognizable point. So the leading edge of this stain up here. And I'm going to go down to the cloud. And of course I placed it right over top where I need to be. So I'm just going to reinsert that. So again, we'll align from that point. And we can see that the corresponding point in the scan is right here. Now, an actual crime scene reconstructionist would be doing this very carefully, very precisely. I'm going to rush a little bit just to get through this demo, but you'll get the idea. So again, I'm picking now a second point at the leading edge of this blood stain. I'm going to put it over to here. And now just to make sure that it is aligned properly, we can kind of play with the transparency here. And as we make the image more transparent, we can see that the stains in the scan behind the image, they do match up in the same spot. So it's just a check to make sure that the image is aligned properly. I'm just going to repeat that for a couple more images here. A2 image, which is here. This one's a little bit easier to align because I have this big target, which is what we recommend our users to do. So I'll go from the center of that target to the center of the target in the cloud. And then I'll take the edge of that stain, put it there. So again, it's aligned. We can use the transparency just to make sure that it's matches up good. And I have several more, but I'm just going to do those two for now. You get the idea. So what we're going to do now is we'll use our stain tool to trace the blood stains that we can see in much more detail now than we could in the initial scan. So if I just zoom in closer to the stain, I'm just going to click on the leading edge of the stain and then the trailing edge of it. And now I'm just, by dragging my mouse, I'm positioning an ellipse. So what will happen with liquids as they impact the wall, they always leave an ellipse-shaped stain. And the geometry of that ellipse lets the Reconstructionist determine the exact direction that it was going in 3D even to the origin point. So what we're going to do is just very carefully make sure that this represents as well as possible the stain itself. So I'm just going to kind of tweak it a little bit. Now I'm not a trained Reconstructionist, so I'm sure this isn't perfect, but for a demo here, that'll work. I'm going to zoom out, and we could do this on several of these stains. We could trace as many of them as they want, and what will eventually happen is it's going to do a best fit analysis of the different stains and the different trajectories to determine the most likely origin point. Anyways, I'm just going to do the one from that image, and then I'm going to do one from this image here. You can see that the Reconstructionist was very interested in a couple of these ones down here. Even though they're not the biggest stains, they're perhaps the cleanest in the sense that they have very clear ellipsoidal geometry. Whereas some of these ones that are bigger, there's a lot of smearing. They've started running down the wall a little bit. But the Reconstructionist liked this one, so I'm going to use that one as well. So I'll just put another stain around this one. And hopefully I can get it relatively accurate. So a Reconstructionist would do this with several different stains. They would be measuring as many as they can accurately trace out throughout the scene. The more stains they have, the more redundancy there is in the reconstruction, and the more confidence they'll have in the point of origin. Anyways, I'm just going to do those two for right now, and I'm going to run my convergence tool. I'm going to select my two blood stain lines here and add them to the analysis. So we'll accept that, and finally the Reconstructionist would create a report. And ultimately this report is what they would be taking into court with them. This is an interesting scene because we can see now that it has determined there's a point of impact at the center of this sphere. So likely all of the blood that we see on this wall came from that initial point of impact. There's another blood stain over on one of the other walls here, and I'm not going to repeat the process for it. But what we can see is if we did, it would come up with a completely second independent source for that particular stain. And what the Reconstructionist would do is they can prove then that there was first this primary source where there is an impact. This would be at a standing height. And then there's a secondary source where a second blow was made down on the ground. So the Reconstructionist can basically prove a certain level of intent based on the fact that there was not just a single impact, but that there was the second impact. So for a defense to claim that they didn't mean to kill is hard to defend, because there was the first impact and then the second one that was very distinctly at ground level after the fact. Just going to switch now to an animation that I had created. This is a scene that I had made quite a while ago. This was about 10 years ago. I was working with a police agency in Texas, and they had a large incident that they needed some help reconstructing. As I mentioned, this is from about 10 years ago, so the technology isn't as good as what we saw in the scan just prior. And in fact, I'll show another scan in a couple minutes here that goes even beyond that in terms of the realism of just the cloud itself. When I first started looking at this again, it struck me there's some really incredible new tools that we've built since this time. The building in the background here, this was modeled using polylines with widths and thicknesses and simply leaving gaps for windows. Today we could use, of course, the architectural tools that we have, the walls, doors, and windows, to create a more realistic looking building. It would also be able to be modeled in a fraction of the time that I remember spending on this one. As well, we have a new body poser tool that you'll be able to see some of the victims throughout this animation. The symbols that we're using to represent them, they're not positioned quite right. Some of them look a little bit awkward. And the new tool that we've built, and you'll learn a little bit more about that in the next presentation, would give just a more polished and refined look to this animation. Anyways, that said, it's a very compelling story that this animation tells, so I'm going to show it anyway. So what happened, there was a man came walking up to this building. It's a big office building. He's not an employee, but he's a boyfriend of an employee that was there. His girlfriend sees him coming and knows that he's not supposed to be here, that there's a problem, so she walks up to him. They talk for a few seconds. They're having a bit of a heated discussion, and then he shoots her. He then goes on a bit of a rampage throughout this building. You can see these red flashes represent bullet shots. He comes back to this woman here. She hadn't been killed. He fires, his weapon misfires, and he stops and reloads and doesn't shoot her. She ended up surviving this. Anyways, he shot out the window, climbs in through the window, and enters the building. He's looking for somebody specific. He chases this one employee through the building, fires a couple of shots, kills this woman. That man escaped out the front door, so he's fine. He's got away. You can see the density of the points on this wall. There's a point about every centimeter spacing. As I mentioned in the previous scan we were looking at with the blood pattern analysis, they were spaced about every millimeter. And the next scene I'll show you, it's even closer than that. Anyways, he comes into this lunchroom, just scans through the room. He's looking for somebody specific, doesn't see them, turns, walks out. He's still looking for somebody. Anyways, at this point, the police are starting to arrive on scene, and he can hear the sirens and see the lights flashing out the window. So he shoots himself, and that's the end of the scene. Okay, so I'm going to just open up another new drawing. I'm just going to attach one more point cloud to show you the quality of the cloud now. So what we're looking at here is from above, there's a bar or restaurant down here in the corner. This is a parking lot. And what I'm going to do is use one of my tools here to open a true space view, it's called. Just going to point, snap to a point in the point cloud to specify a point that I'm nearby. It's showing me now a list of the different scans that were made in this scene. There's about a half a dozen different scanner setups. I'm just going to pick one of these. And this true space window, now this is not IntelliCAD now, we're outside of IntelliCAD. But what I can do here is turn off the point cloud view. And what we see here is the panoramic imagery of the scene. So this is photographs that were taken by the scanner. I'm just going to separate these two windows. Maybe. So I'll just put my IntelliCAD window on the left-hand side, the panoramic photography on the right-hand side. And as we're changing the view within the 3D photo here, you can see the point cloud view is just updating to match. These yellow triangles represent additional scanner locations. And we can look around the scene. Anyways, what I wanted to show is just the quality now of the point cloud. And it's almost getting to the point where you don't even necessarily need to model the building in some cases. In this case, I could do an animation through this scene where the point cloud itself can really become the building model. But that's not always the case. Anyways, that's what I wanted to show you. Are there any questions? Thank you.